All right. Well, I'm gonna go in presentation mode on my PowerPoint. I'm gonna share the screen.
Could I introduce you?
Oh, sure, go right ahead.
Yes, welcome everyone to our meeting of the Biocultural Collaborative Artists and Tradition Bearers Working Group. My name is Mark DeWitt. I'm a co-convener of this group along with Lola Amard, who's going to make the presentation today. She works at the Children's Museum in New Orleans, and she's going to take it from here. The title of our session today is Empowering Youth as Tradition Bearers in Changing Times. So take it away, Lola.
All right, thanks, Mark. See, I'm gonna share my screen here and um, go into presentation mode. Here's our lovely little graphic introducing our subject today, our discussion topic. We're thinking about, what can artists and educators and folklorists do to help empower youth as tradition bearers in changing times. So we had we posed a question with some of our social media about this presentation with that question. When How can artists and educators, support today's youth and their families in preserving their community's culture in the face of environmental change, cultural displacement, and even relocation? So we all, I think, feel every day what precarious times we're living in culturally, environmentally, all of these things, and keeping communities connected throughout these times is very important, of course. So we have our open-ended questions as youth educators. We like to work with these open-ended questions. So there's curiosities going into that. And just a bit about the group, of course. If you are not familiar, I think most of you here are familiar with the Bioculture Collaborative. But the group has formed as an initiative through the Louisiana Folklore Society to help sustain the traditional cultures of coastal Louisiana. And then, the mission, of course, is to connect those interested in the human dimension of the land loss, transmitting culture in a time of disruption, and the impacts of climate migration. So we're kind of looking at those topics through a youth-oriented lens. And then, of course, we are the Artist Tradition Bearers and Coastal Issues Working Group. And right now we're serving as, a networking group, a learning group, and we hope to, in the future, create projects together. But until that part of it forms, we're here to share ideas and brainstorm and come together with inspiration. So there's a lot of ways to approach this topic, but like I said, I'm sort of presenting the way that we've been exploring it. So as Mark said, my name is Lola. I'm the Culture and Heritage Director at the Louisiana Children's Museum here in New Orleans. And just wanted to tell you a little bit about the programming that we have been exploring. And a little bit of background with the Children's Museum, of course. It's been a fixture of New Orleans since the late 1980s and recently relocated to City Park. So in 2019, and with an evolved mission and adapted the Reggio Emilia inspired approach to early childhood education. I can tell you a little bit about that and why we have been excited about using that approach when it comes to talking about children participating in their own cultures. So the Reggio Emilia approach is an educational philosophy that originated post-World War II in Reggio Emilia, Italy. And so It's named after the place that it originated. And the founder, one of the founders, was an educator named Loris Malaguzzi, and along with mainly the mothers of Reggio Emilia, developed preschools and this approach to early childhood education. And there are a lot of values and principles that go into it, but mainly the emphasis is on the importance of child-led and open-ended inquiry, that children are capable and curious. They're citizens of the world now and not in the future. And so their perspective is worth everything. They are competent and capable, and they learn best through exploring, inquiring, hands-on experiences, and the dynamic of the learning environment is that of co-learning and co-creation. So teachers, or the caretakers, the adult figures, the children, and the environment are co-creating, basically, and the environment is known as the third teacher. But the teachers are there to provide inspiration. Provocation is a term that we use, so sort of like invitations, materials that might inspire inquiry. And then documentation is a big part of that approach as well. So that also kind of lends itself well to this like documentation of individual stories or cultural preservation. And of course, the approach values the arts, documenting the learning, and then the strong relationships between family and community and school. So over here, The 100 Languages, that is a poem written by Loris Malaguzzi. And in the link of resources, I can provide the poem, but it basically describes that all children are born with 100 languages, and this is a metaphorical 100. It is meant to express that children use many different ways to express themselves, to learn about the world. Another form of it is like when you kind of describe how people have different multiple intelligences, like emotional intelligence, or different skill sets. But the poem is really beautifully describes this in a way, for example, to say that, children are born with 100 languages and the world takes 99 from them, and basically denies their truth, denies their observations and experiences. But the child knows better and says, oh no, I have the 100 languages. The 100 is there. And also let me know if you have any like comments or questions throughout. I'm just trying to get through the slides and not take too much of everybody's time. But if, and Holly or any of the other Reggio experts in the audience, if you want to add, feel free. But just a general recap or overview. And with environment as the third teacher, this is another way to describe place-based learning, which of course is great for, exploring local cultures. It develops connections to one's surrounding and greater appreciation for the local community. You have direct inspiration to foster curiosity, inquiry, sense of wonder, promote sustainability and environmental stewardship by encouraging children to care for and respect their surroundings. It's not just, it's not a distant figment of imagination or, an unreachable land. It's your own backyard. So you develop a connection to that and build respect. And then building blocks for civic participation and awareness. Um, Malaguzzi emphasized that the environment plays a central role in making learning meaningful. And so that environment, we are surrounded by it, obviously, but as the teachers and caretakers, we're responsible for creating an environment as well to reflect the values. So this is a great quote. The environment should act as an aquarium which reflects the ideas, ethics, attitudes, and culture of the people who live in it. This is what we are working towards. So it's it's a great thing to be mindful of what the environment is reflecting onto our, our future leaders, are the children of the world now. And how are we, you know how are we cultivating that and bringing that environment into the future, with the way that we're taking care of it now as adults. And for example, Reggio, was a learning style that was developed in Italy, but it, it practicing it in Italy is completely different than practicing it in New Orleans, Louisiana, or Bristol, Tennessee, or, any of the, infinite places on earth. It's all the place-based learning is I'm just like losing my words, but you know what I mean? Like it's not going to look the same in any different place. It's going to be inspired by the place where you are. Environment informs and influences the learning experience. So we are intentional about what we provide in that environment to reflect the world around us. So, we share different food ways that people living here may see and identify with or be introduced to. Even so, we're talking about the building blocks of civic participation. We do encounter like we can dress up a pothole in this town, and that is part of our just way of life. But here, for example, the city table at our museum that invites children. Well, the prompt says, what does my resilient city need? So the prompt is getting kids to imagine what types of things need to be present for a happy and healthy community, so they can create different elements of a city. It's that the silver piece that you see running through on the table, that's supposed to be the Mississippi River. These blocks, you can create different structures and bridges and levees, so they can take their lived experience, do some problem solving, think about, exercise empathy, thinking about others in their community, and what's necessary for survival, and apply it through play. And concept that we're kind of looking at this lens through the idea that your family is your first folk group. Basically, this is something that, especially if you're, a kindergartner, I think around that age, you start to do this sort of project in school where you learn about your place in the world. Your house exists in a neighborhood and your neighborhood is in a city, and you zoom out and you realize that you're part of all these different groups. And a sense of belonging is being fostered. And ideally, there's a strong sense of that. And there's a lot of reasons why those connections aren't being made. I guess that's, why we're thinking about how can we help those connections get stronger. But just from the very basic level, you learn that you start, in a family unit, whatever that may look like, and then zoom out and you're part of all of these. This is where you learn to see the world. So why is it important for children to learn about and intentionally participate in their family folk groups? And, there's so many reasons, and I'm sure you guys all, can relate to this. Cultural identity. We were talking about the feeling of belonging and sense of self, connection to, your sense of place and your environment. Appreciation for, tradition and your own personal heritage, appreciation and preserving of cultural roots, encourages the practice of passing down traditions to future generations. Then the interpersonal relationships, encouraging the intergenerational connections when they're available, and understanding like your connection to your bigger family picture, and not just to your own immediate family, but to others in the community. Diversity and inclusion, understanding similarities and differences between your own family folk group and other family folk groups, exposing young people to different cultures, customs, perspectives, all the good important things: empathy, inclusivity, tolerance, curiosity, and even just within the community of one city and seeing the diversity there. And personal development enhances self-awareness, social skills, emotional intelligence, sense of belonging. We were saying that, but that's important as a foundation for other relationships going forward, those relational skills. And so, we aim to encourage young people and their families to look intentionally at their family story. And this is not an easy topic to cover in a lot of ways, especially as a museum. Our perspective, we're kind of approaching this in an informal way. We don't have the classroom environment. A lot of the resources that we find to our curriculum for a class over a period of time. So we're trying to figure out how to make projects that can span a longer time in different ways, but also just kind of broach the topic informally, even though, as we're encountering people with through short periods of time, and just introducing the idea. And of course, we work mainly with an early childhood age group, but we are actively working on programming to age up. We also have a lot of other outreach programs that work with slightly older children, and we have been working more with, we have like a pilot program right now with teenagers. And as we go and grow into ourselves as a museum, those older age groups are definitely, what we're hoping to continue to develop programming with. So, meaning to say, the personal narrative and what they can understand about the bigger picture of their family story will develop over the years. So there's different levels of appropriateness and, just perspective and ability to talk about that. But they're starting to tell stories about and understand, themselves and the place in their place in the rest of the world. So how can we encourage this intentional awareness? And then what I meant to say in the slide before, this is not always easy subject to talk about. So cultivating trust as, an institution that's facilitating programs like this. But also, our goal is not to be an expert, but to support young people with the tools to tell their own stories. So this image is from one of the youth-led groups that we work with called Be Loud Studios. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them, but they are a great youth-led program. They're teenage podcasters, and they came and set up an interview station at the museum for our Family Folklife Day, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So we piloted the Family Folklife programming in 2022, and we wanted to learn more about the family folklife cultures of our community, of New Orleans and the surrounding areas. And, of course, we want to expand, but, we had to start somewhere. And so Family Folklife Day is on one day. It is in October. So this is Sunday, October 1st. This year it'll be on Saturday, October 12th, 2024. And it's in October because in honor of Louisiana Folklife Month. And but we explore family folklife programming all year round. But this is a day that we have been we piloted, and as we get more funding and develop the programming, we're hoping to grow it into a bigger local cultural celebration that can introduce some of these tools and supportive practices for young people to document and tell their stories. And then, of course, just acknowledging that, there are many other pioneers. I mean, people who have done this work for a long time before. And, one of my main inspirations, of course, is the Folklife program in Louisiana and the Louisiana Voices curriculum. It's incredible resources that are online, very easy to access. And so I have provided a lot of links and then, so of course, and Patty's here too, local learning made, of course, for the Folklife Project in Louisiana, and just so many, admirable organizations that have inspired us. And this is just an example of some of the ways we've started to present the subject. In the art studio, we have posters and these come out at different times of year because there's, a lot of relevant information. But basically, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about folk life and what folk culture is. I think when people hear that word, from what I've gathered, even just talking to colleagues, that when I try to explain, the meaning of family folk life, that it doesn't necessarily, it's not just traditions and ways of people from the past, or only, rural life, that urban settings can have very vibrant folk lives. And really the designation of folk life is really just that it's a cultural group that is continuing their practices. So it's a living practice. It's groups getting together and doing things and continuing them. So just kind of sharing a little bit about what that is, and that and sharing with people that everybody has a folk life, and just the idea, introducing the idea of examining what that might be for yourself, because it's really hard sometimes to have the perspective while you're living it, what your folk life practices might be. And that they can be very basic, and seemingly um, you know, uh inconsequential, what you might eat for an after school snack, or what you might do on a Sunday. um when those answers are collected, people see what they have in common with their neighbors, what might be different, and for what reasons, and it gets to be pretty great, interesting conversation. So some of the story, why collect your family stories? Why is it important to tell your own story? This was one of the ways we, in the first year, tried to collect some answers to what we were calling family folk life questions on Family Folk Life Day. So before we had the capacity, the sort of like interview process or collection process has been growing in different ways. But before we had developed that, this was one way. So we had clipboards around the museum in different areas that related to the different questions. So, a question about family foods that was in our grocery store area, where they're playing, and cafe, and they can relate that to what they're like actively playing with. So someone here wrote about some specifics about goulash, and they were saying that, so the question is, were there any foods that you ate as a child that were normal in your family group but not considered normal by other children that you knew? And then this person said goulash, not with the noodles, ground beef, potato, tomato, bell peppers, seasoning, garlic. When I told my friends about this meal, they either had no idea or assumed it was made with noodles. My grandpa followed his own recipe, but most American ones don't sub with potato. So this is very interesting. And if we had been in an interview setting, I would have, you know, been able to elaborate a bit more, because I realized how much I don't know about goulash practices. But there's this whole, realm of information and distinguishing, goulash identity. But so this is a great way, this is within our own community. And, but it only goes so far because it's on a clipboard, but at least we've collected a bit of that, and it gives us some insight. And then, what are some schoolyard games played as a kid? People wrote red light, green light. Look who's here, in quotation. Spidey. I'm just like, I'm thinking that's Spider-Man. Kickball, Consuela. Maybe that's related to Look Who's Here. I'm not sure. Steal the Bacon. Did anyone play that? Yeah. And then Toe in the Moth could be mouth. It's anyone's guess, but we got a good like little roundup of schoolyard games. So that's something I want to definitely explore more. And then another question, what are some things you learned to notice and mark the changing seasons? When the TV has football on, obviously football is a big part of a lot of people's family folk life. I think this says the leaves turn different. Crawfish season, a breeze in the air, heat waves, etc. It gets colder. Leave, I'm not sure, but we have a good variety of this. And then I'll just point out another one here, because these are all so good. But asking about what kind of music, songs, or instruments does your family enjoy. We get a lot of intergenerational contributions here. This one says, my mom and grandpa and I all play the trumpet. I play the piano, love Sophia. And then you need be rock boy. You trumpet something. I love it. So, I could only do so much to interpret, but, and then of course, um, this one at the end, I can't quite interpret it, but there's a full expression there of a meal that they're enjoying, I'm gonna assume. And another activity that we had going that was pretty fun, and we've done this for 2 years, was the Family Folklife Scrapbook. And this was in the studio in the park. And so basically a table set up with scrapbooking materials and more of the family folklife questions. And families were invited to sit down and create a page together, basically writing something about their family. And this is one example. This is Cedar and his brother Caleb, and they created this page in collaboration with their mom and dad. So their mom wrote that we like to play games, stickball, go on hikes, read books, travel, ride bikes and scooters, draw and make art, cook and bake cookies, play music, tell stories, dress up, and spend time together talking. Love Cedar, Caleb, John, and Sarah. And then Caleb drew these houses, and then Cedar had his like multiple pencil swirls going on in the center, and it was just like a full family collaboration. So I really like that page. And then some other great examples. My family and uh, my family and me like to ride bikes. And then you've got a beautiful illustration of their family together. And then this person dated from October 9th. That's the first year we did it. Today was perfect. Oh, today was the perfect day for me. I spent all day with my cousins at the Children's Museum. We enjoyed all the activities, les bon temps roulés. And then this was like a 3D, you could pop out the fold and see the whole family there. And then I believe like this looks to me like a kendo in the museum. We have these windows that are called kindos because it's a kid window and it's only meant for a short person to go into. But they kind of have like a cork frame around them. So I feel like these guys are in a kendo. And then you see NOLA Children's Museum, and they describe their date together. And so last year we were able, with the help of Be Loud, who I mentioned before, to expand some of this interview process. And Be Loud Studios, they produce an awesome podcast locally, and it's all run by these great teenagers who have been learning all the ins and outs of producing a podcast, the interview process, creating questions, interacting with people in the field, basically. And they set up a podcasting table in the studio. And then they also went out on Family, like this was on Family Folklife Day. They went out throughout the museum and with their recording devices and asked family folklife questions. So talking to people about, if they weren't from here, just like asking about themselves, about living in New Orleans, about moving here, just a variety of questions that kind of were centered around this family folklife topic. And they produced it as a segment and part of their podcast. So it came together pretty well. And they're going to be coming back again this year. And we also will be collaborating with NOVAC, New Orleans Video Access Center, and they do great programming with youth filmmakers. So we're going to be meeting up again. We're going to be meeting soon to discuss what that will look like this year. But having them involved has been wonderful because, we're really interested in the youth-led approach to this. And it's pretty cool having them, you kind of tell them what it's about or what your you give them the rundown of what it is, and then they boil it down and translate it, and they get it and they run with it. So, you know, trying to share that we hope Family Folk Life Day helps people learn about their neighbors, and you could say foster empathy and curiosity and diversity, inclusion, all of these things. But then the kids are they're just like, yeah, we don't want people to be racist anymore. And that's what this is about, and it's like, they're not mincing words. They get it. And it's true. And so it feels good to have them like into the mission. And also, yeah, inspiring us further. This is an example of another activity, which was exploring fishing stories. And we have all these impact areas, which are basically like the departments within our education department. And so I think, connecting any subject, like if it's in school or if it's in a museum, to like, it could be easily connected to a cultural practice. And there's so many examples that show this. But I think if a teacher is in a classroom and they have to meet a certain level, certain requirements for the curriculum, one thing, one way that we're thinking about this is like, how can we help connect how can we help make the cultural connections, which would deepen the learning, make it more place-based, make kids more connected to the community around them, and see that their daily life is their culture. So that's just an aside on that. But all of our impact areas have a focus on STEM, arts, and literacy. And we're just constantly seeing how family folk life connects to all of it. And so we did a foodways, like a food demo with jambalaya, and learn about the Trinity, what the Trinity is, and getting kids involved and showing parents that a lot of these like hands-on things, especially showing kids capabilities, is a lot is enlightening a lot of times, because maybe the kids are at an age where they hadn't quite started participating in the kitchen, for example, or in whatever family folk life practice, if you want to say like food preparation or whatever it may be. But we have plastic knives that are, it's not a sharp metal blade, it's a kid safe blade. But the kids are getting in there, they're chopping up the peppers and onions and celery, and they're learning that that is the basis for many different dishes that make up the food culture of our area. And they're learning the context, but then there's also, there's fine motor skills, and there are, math concepts, and literacy, talking like different vocabulary words and history, and so many things intertwined just in this basic activity. And then you see there's the parents are guiding the kids with prompted by this provocation. So, we like to hope that it inspires people to continue after they leave the interaction and continue to involve their kids in, their own folk life activities like this. And of course, we had, because it's New Orleans, we have to highlight our musical traditions. We had a interactive performance that focused on the roots of New Orleans music, and had a second line in our courtyard. The Second Line Arts Collective, Little Stompers, they've been performing with us on Family Folk Life Day and other times throughout the year for the last 2 years. And that was really fun to get everybody involved. You could like tell which folks were like they had been to plenty of second lines and they knew what to do. And then they were bringing in people who weren't as familiar, but everybody was getting involved. And so, we tried to feature culture bearers, artists, performers, folks that really, get down to the level of a young person and involve them. This was Walter Sandifer III, also known as Spy Boy Walter. He led a great drum circle. This is his son here, who is, clearly the tradition, the baton has already been passed. And so music obviously is such a great way to connect people through culture. And this was, a really wonderful program. And we had percussion instruments, and it was getting really loud in that atrium, but but we had a lot of fun, and continue to like have ongoing relationships with artists like Walter, who will return with programming and keep these traditions going. And this was another awesome program with Monique Verdun and Ida Aronson and Brandon Keller. They came and led an exploration of Indigenous architecture and technology. So, the challenge was how to make this activity, how to work with the open-ended, process-oriented, values that we place, especially on like art making and creativity. And so they did an amazing job providing materials and teaching about like the native plants and local materials that were involved in Indigenous architecture. And it was also coinciding with the Nani Bolbancha being built on the Lafitte Greenway. So all the mounds that the kids, they created their own like small works, and all of those clay pieces were then placed into the mound when it was being built. So they got to explore and learn like about history and present day expressions of that, and then also contribute to a public work. And so this came together in so many wonderful ways. And then talking about literacy, of course, sharing the different, yeah.
I don't want to interrupt, but it's about 10 minutes until the hour. And
Okay,
we
thank
were
you.
going to leave some time
We
for
should almost be
discussion.
done.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, so just with like the intention behind our works, our projects, we hope to have well, right now we do have resources on our website for some of these concepts: open-ended learning, making learning visible. That's the documentation process, and also exploring your own family folk life. We hope to have a site that is an explorable database of what we are archiving through, like when we get further into a documentation project around folk life specifically. We want to be able to offer that back to everyone that's participated and create more resources. So that's one future aim of the project. And we want to continue to explore all the things that I mentioned, the child-led, intergenerational, open-ended, and place-based investigations. And we hope that that encourages people to be active participants in their own communities and cultures. And then, the documentation process and is very important to us, and making visible all those 100 languages. And I think that's also a great metaphor, for the beauty and diversity, not only of different types of expression, but many different types of people and ways to live, and live together. So, so that's a bit about a bit more than a bit about what we do at LCM. And invite anybody that has ideas or inspiration or wants to collaborate with us, like, please stay in touch. And then of course I want to open the floor up to discussion. And this is a QR code to our Google Doc. It's our BCC working group notes, which it's not an exhaustive list by any means. It's just as many as I could think of in a short period of time. But if you follow that link, there's a lot of resources that I talked about today and more that I didn't talk about. But please feel free to share your own resources there or here in the chat. But I would love to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll put that link in the chat as well. And yeah, if anybody has anything to add, please feel free.
I want to jump right in because it's so exciting to hear people talk about culture along with place-based learning, because for all these years, it's been about the environment and nature and children. I developed something when I was doing a workshop for the Kennedy Center on cultural stewardship for children, which I will share with you. But I think it's an idea for everybody to think about, of having young people decide what's important to them and feel like they're contributing to stewardship. So I'll be happy to share that very short thing, but it's something I've been using a lot lately.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much. And if anybody wants to link in the chat, I can also transfer those resources over to the document.
It's the Word doc, and I really suck at using this technology. I will email you.
That sounds great. That sounds perfect. Thank you. Well, Patty, you were saying you've been doing this work for a long time. How did you start?
My daughter went to kindergarten, and her teacher had moved to Alexandria, Virginia from California, and she was teaching 8th graders in a Catholic school. And she applied that to 5-year-olds in Alexandria, Virginia, and it was awful. So I was like, wait, don't you know where you are? And the people speaking Spanish here are refugees from El Salvador. They're not illegal Mexicans. I just started talking to her about culture, and then I started doing workshops, and then it's gone from there. She's now 40 and has a 10-year-old, a 5th grader.
Wow.
And in Louisiana Voices, I was thinking about what's particularly of interest to all of us, and one is the seasonal round calendar that we have in French and English and Spanish to say, what is your year like? And when people start filling this out and they can compare, this is what we do, and then Mary Hufford in West Virginia used this concept of the seasonal round for environmental impact on a forest in Appalachia and what used to be and what is now.
I love the round
Because
calendar.
local people know. So that's a tool, and then the other is the whole unit on sense of place, the state of our lives, with so many ways for us to think about a place that we take for granted, and you start making it more granular about analyzing what makes a sense of place. And some of those workshops, I'll just send you a note, Lola, and about ones that I think are particularly useful for thinking about sense of place and culture.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think most people, they don't realize that they're living seasonally when, they know which months to eat what seafood in, or they're celebrating certain holidays, and the reason, or, when or when not to eat crawfish, for example, and then it all ties back to the land. And so if you can invite people, like you said, to think more granularly, that's what that made me think of. If you just keep like going back to the roots, and contextualizing, making connections, leads to appreciation.
So is there anybody in here who's working with older students?
Like teenagers or college
Or
students?
yeah, or fourth graders, not little. I mean, all the pictures I saw, you're with pretty little kids.
Yeah.
So once you're going to get students who can write and do interviewing and write stuff up, opens a whole other thing.
Totally.
Like the podcasters, I love that. Be Loud.
Be Loud Studios. Yeah. We do have some, we have outreach programming that is third grade. That, and my coworker Alana and Stephanie, they're doing a lot of the environmental education specifically. And so they've been doing a great job trying to tie in those family folk life threads. But yeah, those projects get to go a little bit more in depth with class, like groups of kids over time. And definitely looking to develop more of those opportunities, like you said, because there's more to explore. But when the museum was created, it was unapologetically 0 to 8 years old. So we've been growing since that first.
It was a gorgeous museum and a gorgeous setting.
We're
Really
very
lucky
to be in the park. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, those resources.
Well, I know that Monique has done some amazing work around mapping and using maps to say what was here, what is here, what would you like to see here. I'm also going to send you a mapping story from asking a family to map their neighborhood and how every person in the family does it completely differently.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, maps are so fascinating, especially when you except for like satellite imagery, when you realize that maps have been drawn by somebody, and yeah, taking into consideration what the perspective of the map maker is. It's interesting lens on historical maps, but then yeah, taking that into your own hands, it's pretty enlightening.
Lola, are y'all intentionally expanding beyond 8 years old?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, especially programmatically. It takes a bit longer with permanent exhibits, to develop funding to change those, but the facilitating and expanding activities based on prompts throughout the museum, as well as different specific field trips, outreach in schools, and then also expanding to teenagers, hoping to you know, wanted to get to the point where we could have later operating hours for older kids. Or, you know, we've been doing internships this summer and volunteers and things like that. So, and then we also have camps. But yes, that is a big initiative that we're working on. And I'm curious, you know, besides like resource sharing in a Google Doc, what might be a good way to stay in conversation with each other about different projects we have going on, or you know, just brainstorming and things like that. I'm always, yeah, my inbox is open, I guess. I'll just say that. Because I'm early on in my journey facilitating this type of programming. I've been with the museum for 3 years, but I mean, obviously it's been a lifelong interest, but as far as being in a position to create programming like this, so I'm pretty new on that path. So I'm very appreciative to connect to people who have been doing it for a while. And but I know, yeah, time always goes on and there's always new things to consider. So
I was wondering, as you talked about the Acadiana Writing Project and their network of teachers who teach writing, that they might be a good ally. And I'm not sure if they include New Orleans, if New Orleans has its own writing project, but I know the Acadiana Writing Project does have a number of teachers, including Sandy Lovereed.
Acadiana Writing Project, and expanding scope is also in our mission. So it sounds like things that you could like collaborate with from a distance, you know, regionally, would be within the realm of possibilities.
Lola, I'm wondering if anybody else here is working with this kind of, doing this kind of work. Are y'all here to learn? Are you here, you know, I'm wondering if you're already doing some of this.
It's a great question. If anyone would like to offer any personal accounts.
Okay, I'd like to say something. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me? I gotta tell y'all, I went to a funeral yesterday. I'm sorry. And I'm so low key right now, just the energy. So yeah, I unexpected leaving to me. I am now a writer of children's books, but you know, one of the reasonings for writing, several reasons. One is being a member of Louisiana Folklore Society. I can't tell you how that's changed a lot of my perspective, but also my first degree is law enforcement. And a friend of mine from New Orleans was telling me that, you know, a lot of the crime is like children are so disheartened in the New Orleans area after COVID, after Katrina. Of course, a lot of those children are grown up now and that kind of thing, but I think everything kind of trickles down. And so there's kind of like a feeling of hopelessness. And I think my emotional intelligence kind of set in and thought, well, this has to be one of the reasonings. You know, sometimes we do things and we can't quite grasp why we're doing it and you know, 100%. But I think that was a part of my reasoning, just hearing something like that. And even I heard that for the summer camps, a lot of the kids had the food services turned off, you know, just a lot of reasonings why they wouldn't even want to go to camp maybe. But so the book that I'm writing, I've written one, it's on Amazon. The second one is written, but it's not on Amazon yet. And I'm thinking now maybe just a total collaboration somehow has to be done, because it's about the first Southern superheroes. And, you know, at 63, I always mention my age on here because it's like, I feel like a kid being a member of LFS, because I'm learning so much that you think I would know by now, you know, and I really don't. So it makes me feel like regenesis of my youth in a way. So the thing is that the superheroes are also spawning off of maybe thoughts that I had as a child. You know, who it seems like there are superheroes all over, but none of them are from Louisiana. Or I think that was a Gambit or something like that years ago. I don't quite remember, but somebody did tell me that.
Oh yeah,
It's
he was
just
an
the idea.
X-Men.
It's almost like the idea that now's a good time for our kids to know, all children from all walks of life, that yeah, there could be a superhero, or there are a few of them actually in the books from Louisiana. I know that books inspired me, and I know that, you know, books are not as, maybe they're not as popular. We used to have a bookmobile when I was growing up in St. James Parish. And so it was like a moving library. And we knew the days that it would come, and, you know, we'd wait for the bookmobile and we'd go get our books and that kind of thing. I don't know what children have now. I really don't. But I think that reading a story to them, though, would be effective. As you were talking, I thought, well, maybe in October I can go and read to the children. I'm not deep into the educational system, but I did teach school one year. I was too emotional. I wasn't tough enough, even though I had done police work. I think you have to be tougher than a police officer to teach. You know, with a temper, you have to temper that with the love and all the other good stuff. But at the end of the day, I was more of an emotional, you know, I needed to touch them. They were inner city kids whose moms never came when you called them to a meeting. So you can imagine what I was dealing with. At the end of the day, though, to put into the children's minds something different, to make them feel that, as hopeless as they might feel, and I think maybe especially in New Orleans, you know, that there is a possibility that we could have heroes. They could be one of those heroes, and it's okay to be a hero for the good stuff. Because I hear, you know, they're going for the bad stuff and that kind of thing. So I don't talk about, you know, police type situations or crime or anything like that. I just talk about the possibilities of what you can be as a human being. You know, it starts in Holly Beach, Louisiana, the story, and it talks about this young man who's really stellar, and he's living with his mom, and, you know, that kind of thing. So we read books, if children read books like I used to and think of becoming those characters, you know, I think that it could maybe change some perspectives. So yeah, if we can talk later, I'd love to go and read books for your October celebration. I'd love that.
Yeah, let's definitely stay in touch about that, Sabina. Thank you. I think you're right. Like, well, I mean, just we were talking about the sense of belonging or connection. If for whatever reason that's cut off based on circumstance, environment, then people will feel hopeless. I mean, and it's easy to do because there's a lot of things that are very stressful about the world around us. Like, as an adult, I'm continuously looking for hope, you know, and I think I have to remind myself to keep staying connected to people. And, you know, why would that be any different? I mean, that's like absolutely even more important for kids because, yeah, they're looking to grown-ups to support them. Thanks, Patty. But yeah, I think elevating the idea that each person's experience is important goes a long way, because maybe having superheroes or fictional characters is kind of like a nice, like, you know, focus just to the side of reality, like a way to talk about things that isn't like direct experience, but it's still representational. And that's why, yeah, I guess stories and myths and legends and folk tales persist because it rings true of human experience, but it doesn't get specifically biographical. I don't know if anybody y'all, know what I mean, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to say, the books actually go through, these kids are trying to save the coast, right? That's a big problem we have here. And so in the process of trying to find out how to save the coast, reacting to their environment and their culture, they start learning about the culture and the tradition. They meet the Rougarou, so it's a lot of things that they get to learn about. And I think you kind of touch base on all those things. And so, yeah, I would be honored to do something with your group, to add to it, something positive.
Yes, let's please keep talking.
Sure.
Yeah, Lola, I'm thinking a lot, like Maida asked the question of who in here is doing the sort of oral history stuff. And I'm thinking about the kind of stuff you and I have worked with at the museum and talking about like having oral histories done and conducted by young people with their elders and their caretakers. So it's not simply a conversation with you and an interviewer, but you and someone that you are actively passing these stories along, and like that actual process of talking about what you lived, not just again with an objective observer, but someone that you care about who's asking you these questions and actually able to engage in a dialogue. Like we have a lot of I run the Living with Water program, and I'm from Homa, so this is all stuff that like I'm kind of trying to enact the programming I wish existed whenever I was a kid. And so thinking of things like that, like having these sort of dialogues that are kids and caretakers, not just, an interview and an oral history where they're actual having the connection already established that you can kind of tactilely hear. Also thinking about funding opportunities and things like, I know with the museum, there's a National Academies grant coming up that I've spoken to leadership, and we are in no way, shape, or form able to like really be the ones leading it. But we do at the museum hold this kind of special space of having the audience of young people, something that doesn't exist in a lot of other folks that are doing the sort of folk life and folk culture studies. So yeah, thinking about opportunities to collaborate with people that are doing this kind of work and just tailoring it and resculpting it to the different audience that we hold. I'd say we hold captive, but we kind of do at the museum. That we are one of the few peoples doing this sort of art and culture and history based, like place based understanding of things for people at this very young age. So yeah, if anyone has cool projects going on and y'all need some young folks, please come by. I was going to promote the Artist in Residence program, Lola, where you are practicing your art, but your audience and your collaborators are the kids who happen to be at the studio in the museum on any day. Like there's a lot of really interesting opportunities to get to talk to these people that I view as thought partners and collaborators, because oftentimes they're solving my problems before I even can,
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just, prolific problem solvers and idea makers. That's a great point to bring up, the Artist in Residence program. We are about to conclude our second year and go into the application, like open call and application process for the third year of Artist in Residence. And it's open to any medium of art. So whether you're a visual artist or musician or storyteller, it would be awesome to have a folklorist in residence too, huh? Incorporating that into the programming. But I think, and I'll share that info with our artist group as well when we get the call for artists. When that's ready to go in August. And of course, we don't want to we're not out to reinvent the wheel, but collaborating, as you say, Alana, I think is the best way to go, obviously, because everybody has their particular audience or expertise or, perspective to bring to the table. So I definitely hope to keep making the connections and finding the different funding opportunities and collaborators.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabina.
You're welcome.
Well, we are getting close to the estimated end time of this meeting. If anybody else has anything they want to add, I'm all for continuing this conversation as well. So please reach out to me. I'm behind the BCC artist group at gmail.com email, as well as my LCM email. So feel free to reach out and check out the references on the Google form and add any thoughts or notes that came to mind during the meeting if you would like. And appreciate y'all all being here and talking a bit about this topic. And then also if anybody has any suggestions for future conversations, or if you'd like to lead a conversation or explore a topic, please, that relate to artist and tradition bearers and coastal issues. I totally get a stutter when I'm speaking, guys, by the way. So appreciate y'all hanging in there with me about that. But any ideas for future meetings, please send them our way as well.
I'm sorry, could I say something?
Sure.
I almost forgot. Listen, y'all, we have this new thing called a roundabout. Do y'all know what a roundabout is? All
They've
right.
been building them all over
Yeah.
Acadiana.
Yeah, they're taking over. So our mayor here in Thibodeau made a statement in the newspaper or something recently, and he said something like, I still haven't decided what I want to put like in the center. And then I called the mayor because I wanted to at least be prepared if I was going to present this to y'all somehow. And I called him, he goes, actually, it's not my decision. It's DOTD. And I started laughing. I thought about Maida. I'm like, I bet Maida has connections there. Wouldn't it be great if we collaborated on that, on some artwork to put in a roundabout? And then, it would really, a lot of people don't know about LFS. I don't know if we want a whole lot of people to know, but the point really is that, we're here to be functional in enriching our communities, obviously. And I think as the artist group, maybe we can look into that, and maybe, again, we can collaborate, not just in Thibodeau. We could, as my mom would say, let's make our mark. We could make our mark, maybe around the state by doing something, some beautiful, I don't know, some cultural fleur-de-lis. I don't know, man. Together we'd have to, but maybe if somebody knows somebody at DOTD, or maybe it would be you, Lola, I don't know, to reach out and say, look, this is who we are, and we'd like to explore, being the artist to come up with ideas for these roundabouts and the artwork that's going to be placed. I don't know if anybody's ever brought that up before, but I just
you mentioned that to me in passing when you first, I think, got the idea at the last gathering. And
oh gosh, okay.
So I haven't known where to go with it. I mean, I definitely remember you mentioning this like as an idea, and I think it is a great one. I would like, I bet that there are, I don't personally have experience with like public works like that, but I feel like you said, if you know somebody who knows somebody, I feel like there are artists and sculptors and people who have experience doing that. We can always ask questions and find out. But it also makes me think about how I think someone was presenting about like applying for like place markers.
Yeah.
I forget who that was saying that, but I know that that's some kind of process that you could go through. So if I don't know, I guess if there's some kind of public funds or I think maybe that's like a committee to reach out to our group to see if anybody has experience either creating public works like that or sculpting or working with the local government for that kind of thing. I would love to find out more. I can do some research.
Well, yeah, so he did tell me that it's DOTD, you know, the
DOTD.
Department of Transportation. So
Mhm.
that's an initial contact, I guess. And I'm not trying to throw this on you. Obviously, you have a lot going on, but
I wonder too
idea.
if it's like a bigger Bayou Culture Collaborative initiative where the groups could, I don't know, think of what we want to share and express, and then the artist could translate that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see.
Thank you so much. That's a great idea.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Holly has mentioned, this is a great idea as well. She says, I think we might want to think about how this group could collaborate with the mark makers in advance of hosting the NARIA exhibit. So, the NARIA is the North American Reggio Emilia Association. And, so we call them the Italians. That there's an exhibit that travels every year, and next year, is it next year? I can't remember if it's in 2025 or 26. But the Louisiana Children's Museum is hosting this exhibit, and it in a conference with the Reggio educators from Reggio Emilia that come over and lead this conference. So I'll keep in touch with y'all about that as well. I'm curious what Holly was, more about the ideas that she has, but we will be hosting this conference, and there's like, it's being funded by Agenda for Children. And so we have some funds to create public programming, and obviously it's a place-based approach to the Reggio. The Reggio inspired is place-based, but they recently went to the same exhibit this year to research what it would be like to host it, and that was in Albuquerque. So I'll find out more about what the conference was like from them, and what she was thinking about how we could possibly collaborate. So TBD on that. Thank y'all very much.
Good night.
See you next time.
Bye.